Boeing Starliner spacecraft has successfully landed in the New Mexico desert. The capsule traveled back to Earth from the International Space Station.
Boeing Starliner capsule has successfully returned to the Earth from the International Space Station without its crew on board.
Elon Musk, the Boeing Starliner stranded astronauts are not with us anymore. You might have heard about Boeing Starliner spacecraft, but things aren't going as planned. In fact, NASA astronauts have been stranded on the International Space Station much longer than expected because of some major issues with Boeing Starliner. But guess what? Elon Musk and SpaceX might be stepping in to save the day. So stick around as we break down exactly what's going on. SpaceX and Boeing were both given contracts by NASA to develop spacecraft for crewed missions. But while SpaceX, Musk's company, has been killing it with its Crew Dragon spacecraft, Boeing has struggled to keep up. Crew Dragon has already taken astronauts to and from the International Space Station multiple times without any major issues, proving it's reliable. On the other hand, Boeing Starliner has faced numerous delays, setbacks, and technical problems. What's even more shocking is that SpaceX received less funding from NASA compared to Boeing, yet they've done way more with what they got. Boeing's budget overrun is about $1.5 billion, and they've still not managed a single successful crewed mission. That's a massive gap when you consider SpaceX is pushing boundaries and flying astronauts with fewer resources. The difference in performance between the two companies is glaring. SpaceX's success has made it NASA's go-to for getting astronauts into space, while Boeing is barely hanging on. It's kind of embarrassing for Boeing because they've been around for a long time, and people expect more from a company with their history. The real question now is, can Boeing ever catch up? Or will SpaceX completely overshadow them as NASA's preferred partner for future missions? Boeing's journey with Starliner hasn't exactly been smooth. In 2019, they had their first major setback with an uncrewed test flight that went terribly wrong. The spacecraft was supposed to dock with the ISS, but a timing error completely messed up the mission. Instead of reaching its destination, Starliner went off course and had to return to Earth early. It was a huge blow to Boeing's reputation, and people began questioning if Starliner was ever going to succeed. NASA was not happy about it. They took the incident very seriously and required Boeing to go back and make around 80 different fixes to the spacecraft before they would even consider letting it fly again. These weren't minor tweaks either. These were major changes that Boeing had to implement to ensure that the Starliner would be safe and reliable for future missions. This early failure set the tone for Boeing's entire Starliner program. It seemed like every step forward came with 2 steps back. The timing error was one of just many problems, but it was a clear indicator that Boeing's spacecraft wasn't ready for prime time. NASA's patience was wearing thin, and the pressure was on for Boeing to get things right. Unfortunately, that didn't happen as quickly as they had hoped, leading to more delays and frustration. Fast forward to June 2024, and things didn't get much better for Boeing. They were finally ready to launch astronauts Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore in Starliner for a crewed mission. But even before the spacecraft left the ground, issues started popping up. First, there was a helium leak that had to be fixed at the last minute. Then, during the flight, there were problems with the thrusters, which are crucial for controlling the spacecraft in space. These issues were serious enough that NASA decided not to bring the astronauts back in Starliner. Instead of returning home as planned, Williams and Wilmore were stuck on the ISS while NASA and Boeing tried to figure out what went wrong. The astronauts' mission, which was supposed to last just a few months, was extended until February 2025, leaving them stranded in space, longer than they ever expected. The failure of the 2024 mission was a massive blow to Boeing, as it highlighted once again that Starliner wasn't ready for crewed spaceflight. The spacecraft's technical problems kept piling up, and NASA couldn't trust it to safely bring astronauts back to Earth. As a result, Boeing's reputation took another hit, and people began to seriously question whether Starliner would ever succeed. Living on the International Space Station might sound cool at first, but after months of being stuck there, things start to get tough. For astronauts Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore, their extended stay on the ISS became a real challenge. The ISS is already a pretty crowded place with limited space, and adding more time to their mission made things even more cramped and uncomfortable. Sleep became a major issue. The astronauts struggled to get proper rest because of the noise, the constant activity, and the lack of personal space. Supplies were also a concern. While they had enough to survive, the food and resources they were counting on were designed for a shorter mission, not for an extra few months. As time went on, the living conditions became more difficult to manage. The psychological toll was just as bad. Being stuck in such a confined space for an extended period, with no clear idea of when they'd be able to return home, weighed heavily on the astronauts. They were professionals and handled the situation as best they could, but the stress and uncertainty took its toll. They couldn't wait to get back to Earth, but with Starliner grounded, they had no choice but to wait and hope NASA would find a way to bring them home safely. With Boeing Starliner grounded and NASA needing a way to bring the astronauts home, they turned to SpaceX for help. SpaceX's Crew Dragon spacecraft had already proven itself capable of safely transporting astronauts to and from the ISS, so NASA made the call to use Crew Dragon for the rescue mission, sidelining Boeing once again. This was a huge win for SpaceX. Not only did they get to step in and save the day, but it also solidified their position as the top choice for NASA space missions. While Boeing was still struggling to get Starliner off the ground, SpaceX was already successfully bringing astronauts home. It was another example of how SpaceX became the dominant force in private space travel. For Boeing, this was a tough pill to swallow. They were supposed to be a major player in NASA's space program, but their repeated failures with Starliner had pushed them to the sidelines. SpaceX, meanwhile, continued to thrive, proving that they were more than capable of handling the demands of modern space travel. Boeing's struggles with Starliner are just one part of a larger pattern of setbacks the company has faced in recent years. In 2024, Boeing had a rough start, especially in their aviation division. The infamous 737 MAX disaster, which led to multiple crashes and hundreds of lives lost, was still fresh in people's minds. Boeing's failure to address the safety issues with the 737 MAX severely damaged their reputation in the aviation industry. Then there was the tragic death of whistleblower John Barnett. Barnett had been raising concerns about safety issues within Boeing for years, particularly regarding the production of the 787 Dreamliner. His death was seen as a blow to those who had been pushing for more transparency and accountability from Boeing. The company's inability to address these internal problems only made things worse. One of the biggest problems Boeing has faced with Starliner is its thruster and parachute systems. Thrusters are responsible for maneuvering the spacecraft in space, and without them, the astronauts can't make critical course adjustments. During the 2024 mission, these thrusters failed, which was a massive red flag for NASA. It was clear that something was seriously wrong with the spacecraft's design. But the thrusters weren't the only issue. Starliner's parachutes, which are essential for safely landing the spacecraft back on Earth, also had problems. During testing, the parachutes failed to deploy correctly, which could have been catastrophic if it happened during a real mission. These failures meant Boeing had to go back and make significant changes to both systems, further delaying the program. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more space updates, and comment below with your thoughts on this whole situation. Thanks for watching.